I never thought my life would shift because of a single letter. Yet, there I was, standing in my small kitchen with a mug of lukewarm coffee in one hand, staring at an envelope that looked as if it had traveled through time itself. The paper was yellowed, the ink faint but still legible, and on the front was my full name written in a delicate, old-fashioned script. I didn't recognize the handwriting. My first instinct was suspicion. I don't come from the kind of family that leaves behind mysterious treasures. We were simple people at least, that's what I thought. My parents worked hard, and I'd always believed we owned nothing more valuable than my mother's wedding ring and a dusty family Bible. But this envelope felt different. Heavy. Important. I turned it over. Sealed with wax. Not the kind of thing you see anymore. My hands trembled as I broke it open, and for a moment I held my breath. Inside was a letter that began with words that made my knees weak. To my granddaughter, whom I have never met. I read those words again and again. My mind reeled. I had never known my grandparents, at least. Not beyond vague stories whispered by my mother, who always spoke as if the past was better left buried. But here was undeniable proof. Someone from that buried past was reaching out to me. The letter spoke of an estate and inheritance. Not just money or property, but something far older, far greater, and far more dangerous than gold. The words sent a chill down my spine. Whoever wrote it claimed that my bloodline carried responsibilities, ones my mother had chosen to run from. And now, they claimed, it had all fallen on me. At first, I wanted to laugh. It sounded like something pulled straight out of a novel. But the trembling in my hands told another story. Deep down, I knew this wasn't a prank. The letter ended with directions. A small village 2 hours outside the city. An address. A key taped to the bottom of the page. And a warning in sharp, hurried script. Do not go alone. And do not trust everyone you meet. I set the letter down. My heart pounding. I couldn't explain it. But something inside me shifted. My life, so ordinary, so predictable, suddenly felt like a cracked shell. Something was waiting to break free. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped in routine. I felt called. I didn't know what I would find at that old estate, or why fate had chosen me to carry the weight of a forgotten inheritance. But I knew one thing. I had to go. And once I did, my life would never be the same again. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the words from the letter echoed inside my head. Do not go alone. Do not trust everyone you meet. It felt less like advice and more like a prophecy. By dawn, I had packed a small bag, just the essentials. Jeans, a sweater, my phone charger, a notebook, and, almost without thinking, the silver cross my mother once gave me. She never explained its origin, only that I should keep it close. Until now, I had worn it out of habit. That morning, it felt like armor. The village was called Ravenshollow, a place I had never heard of despite living only 2 hours away. I typed the address into my GPS, but the map froze halfway through the directions, as if it too wanted no part in this journey. Still, I drove. The highway gave way to narrow, winding roads lined with dense forest. Mist clung to the trees, turning the morning light into something ghostly. The deeper I drove, the more I felt like I was leaving behind not just the city, but the world I knew. I arrived around noon. Ravenshollow wasn't much more than a cluster of stone cottages, a church that looked centuries old, and a crooked main street with a few shops. It was the kind of place where time seemed to pause. People glanced at me as I passed, their stares lingering a second too long. It wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. The address from the letter led me to a gate on the far edge of the village. Beyond it stood a grand house, though grand didn't mean inviting. The estate loomed like a sleeping giant, its windows dark, its ivy-covered walls whispering of secrets. My fingers tightened around the key taped to the letter. Before I could open the gate, a voice startled me. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. A man stood a few paces away, maybe in his 30s. Broad shoulders, dark hair, eyes that seemed to hold too many questions. He wasn't dressed like the villagers. His leather jacket and boots made him look like he didn't belong, any more than I did. "I have a letter," I said, my voice more defensive than I intended. "This place, it belongs to me." He studied me for a moment, then sighed. "So it's true. She finally sent for you." "She?" I asked, but he only shook his head. "I'll tell you this much," he said quietly. "Your family's name means something here. Something dangerous. Whatever you do, don't walk through those doors without knowing what waits inside." Then he walked away, disappearing into the mist before I could ask more. I stood frozen at the gate, the letter burning in my pocket, the key heavy in my hand. Part of me wanted to leave, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But another part, the louder part, knew I had already stepped too far into the mystery to turn back. I pushed the gate open. The inheritance was waiting. The gate creaked open like a groan from something ancient. And as I stepped inside, the air grew colder. The path to the house was overgrown with weeds, each step crunching against gravel that hadn't been touched in years. The estate loomed larger with every pace, its windows staring down at me like watchful eyes. The key fit perfectly into the heavy oak door. For a second I hesitated, hearing that stranger's warning in my mind. Don't walk through those doors without knowing what waits inside. But curiosity won. It always does with me. The lock clicked and the door swung inward. The air inside was heavy with dust and something else, something metallic, almost like old blood. My footsteps echoed as I entered a grand foyer, its high ceilings decorated with a chandelier that looked ready to collapse. Paintings lined the walls, stern men and regal women, all with eyes that seemed to follow me. My family, I realized. People I had never met but whose blood still flowed in my veins. I walked deeper, the wooden floor groaning beneath me. The house was silent, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that it was listening. In the library, I found shelves upon shelves of books, many with cracked spines and titles in languages I couldn't understand. A large portrait hung above the fireplace. An older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Something about her gaze felt alive, as though she was daring me to step closer. Pinned to the corner of the frame was a note, brittle and yellowed like the letter that had brought me here. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "If you are reading this, it means the bloodline continues. What we guarded is now yours. But beware, the inheritance is not wealth. It is a burden, a secret tied to this land, and others will come for it. You must be ready." I swallowed hard. This wasn't some fairy tale inheritance. This was a responsibility, a duty passed down like a curse. As I turned, I noticed a door at the far end of the library, half hidden by a curtain. The knob was cold under my fingers. I pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward. The air grew damp, the smell of earth and stone filling my lungs. The basement was nothing like the rest of the house. It wasn't neglected, it was preserved. A long wooden table sat in the center, covered with maps, journals, and what looked like old weapons. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing faintly in the dim light. And then I saw it. At the far end of the room sat a chest, iron-bound and sealed with the same wax emblem that had closed the letter. My heart pounded as I stepped toward it. This was it, the inheritance. But before I could touch it, the sound of footsteps echoed above me. Slow, heavy, coming closer. I wasn't alone in the house. The footsteps above me echoed like thunder. I froze, my hand hovering over the chest, the wax seal glowing faintly in the candlelight. Whoever was up there wasn't trying to hide. They wanted me to know they were here. I blew out the lantern on the table, plunging the basement into near darkness. My pulse hammered in my ears as I crouched behind the chest, straining to listen. The creak of floorboards, one step after another, grew closer. Then silence. I waited, my breath shallow. A sudden crash upstairs made me flinch, the sound of something heavy being knocked over. Whoever it was, they weren't being careful. They were searching. For me, I knew I had to move. Carefully, I slipped the letter and the key back into my pocket and crept toward the staircase. Each step groaned beneath my weight, but the noise upstairs masked my own. When I reached the top, I peeked through the cracked door. The foyer was empty, but the chandelier swayed gently, as though disturbed by someone passing beneath it. I gripped the edge of the doorframe, willing my hands to stop shaking. That was when I heard it, a voice. Low, muttering, almost like a chant. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound was enough to send chills racing up my spine. I stepped out, keeping close to the wall, moving toward the library where the voice seemed strongest. The door was half open. I pushed it slightly, just enough to see inside. A man stood in front of the fireplace, his back to me. Tall, cloaked in black. His hands traced the symbols, carved into the wall as though he were unlocking them with touch alone. And then he turned his head slightly, enough for me to see a glimpse of his face, pale, sharp, with eyes like hollow stone. I know you're here, he said softly, his voice carrying across the room like smoke. The blood has led you home. The inheritance is wasted on you. My heart stopped. He knew who I was. I stumbled backward, my shoes scraping against the floor. The sound gave me away. In an instant, the man snapped his head toward me, his eyes locking on mine. They weren't just cold, they were inhuman. I ran. The house seemed alive as I sprinted down the hall. The portraits glaring, the floor groaning, the walls closing in. Behind me, the man's footsteps were deliberate, calm, almost mocking. He didn't rush. He knew he would catch me. I burst out through the front door and into the misty air of Ravenshollow. My lungs burned as I raced toward the gate, the chill of the village wrapping around me like chains. For a moment, I dared to think I was safe. Then a voice behind me. You can run, but the inheritance binds you. It always finds its heir. I turned, but the man was gone, vanished into thin air. The estate loomed in silence, and I clutched the cross at my neck, trembling. I had no idea what that chest held, but one thing was clear. I wasn't the only one who wanted it. And whatever this inheritance truly was, it had enemies. I didn't sleep that night. Not after what I saw. Back at the small inn in the centre of Ravenshollow, I sat awake on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at the letter again and again. The inheritance is not wealth. It is a burden. The words gnawed at me, and that man in the estate, his voice still echoed inside my head, dripping with certainty. The blood has led you home. How could he have known me? By morning, the village had grown even stranger. People avoided my gaze, whispering when I passed. The shopkeeper who sold me coffee refused my money, pushing it back across the counter with trembling hands. Best you leave, he muttered, before it's too late. But I couldn't leave. Not now. The man I'd met at the gate the day before found me again. Same leather jacket, same unreadable expression. He leaned against the stone wall of the inn as though he'd been waiting for me. You went inside, didn't you? He asked. I didn't answer. The silence was enough. He sighed. Then you've already felt it. The house. It knows when blood returns. It awakens. I crossed my arms. Who are you? Someone who understands what you're about to inherit. His tone was grave, but his eyes softened. and someone who can help you survive it. The word survive it struck harder than I expected. Tell me what's in that chest, I demanded. He shook his head. Not yet. Once you know, there's no turning back. But you should understand one thing. Your family has guarded something in that house for centuries. Something others would kill to possess. That man you saw? He's one of them. My stomach tightened. One of who? Before he could answer, church bells rang out across the village. But there was no mass, no gathering. Instead, the sound carried a warning. Windows shut, doors locked. Within moments, the streets were empty, leaving only me, the stranger, and the echo of the bells. He straightened. They know you're here. You don't have much time. That evening, I returned to the estate with him at my side. The mist was thicker, curling around us like fingers. The gate groaned as it opened, and I swear the air grew colder the moment we crossed onto the grounds. Inside, the house felt more alive than before. The chandeliers swayed, though there was no breeze. The portraits seemed sharper, and faint whispers crawled through the halls, like secrets too impatient to stay hidden. Listen, the man said quietly. Every air hears them. The voices of those who came before. They guide, or they warn. You'll have to decide which. I swallowed hard, my hand brushing against the cross at my neck. The whispers grew louder, pressing against my skull. Words just beyond understanding. Somewhere deep inside the house, a door slammed shut. The inheritance wasn't waiting. It was calling. The whispers grew unbearable. They pressed against my ears, flooding my head with words I couldn't quite understand, half warnings, half commands. The man beside me, my only ally in Ravenshollow, rested a steadying hand on my shoulder. They won't stop until you answer, he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes told a different story. Fear. Answer? To what? The whispers pulled me deeper into the house, guiding my steps down the same narrow staircase to the basement. The air was heavier this time, thick with the scent of smoke and iron. At the center of the room, the chest waited, glowing faintly in the dim light. Its iron bindings pulsed as though alive, as though aware of me. My hand trembled as I touched the wax seal. It was the same crest from the letter and ancient symbol, half cross, half blade. The moment my fingers grazed it, the voices hushed. Silence, sharp and heavy. It's yours, my companion whispered. Only blood can open it. With a deep breath, I pressed the cross at my neck against the seal. The wax cracked. The chest shuddered, then creaked open with a sound like thunder splitting the earth. Inside was no treasure, no gold, no jewels. Instead, there lay an old leather-bound book, its cover etched with the same strange symbols I'd seen carved into the walls. Beside it rested a dagger, its blade blackened with age, the hilt engraved with words I couldn't read. I lifted the book, its weight far heavier than it looked. The pages crackled as I opened it, revealing ink that glowed faintly, shifting across the parchment as though alive. My heart pounded as I read the first line aloud. We are the Watchers, bound by blood to guard the gate between worlds. The air in the room seemed to shift, the walls trembling. The whispers returned louder this time, clearer. I could almost make out words, warnings carried from voices of ancestors long gone. The man beside me bowed his head slightly. Now you understand. But I didn't, not really. My mind spun with questions, with fear. A gate between worlds. A family sworn to guard it. And me, the heir to this impossible duty? As if answering, the dagger shimmered faintly. And for the briefest moment, I saw something in its reflection. Not my face, but a shadow tall, cloaked, with hollow eyes. The man from before. Watching, waiting. I stumbled back, clutching the book to my chest. He knows, I whispered. He knows I've opened it. My companion's expression darkened. Then he'll come. They always come. The room shook again, a deep rumble rising from beneath the floor, as if something far older than the house itself had awakened. The whispers crescendoed, filling my head with a single word, over and over. Choose, choose, choose. The inheritance wasn't just a burden. It was a war, and I had just accepted my place in it. The whispers demanded an answer, but I had none to give. My entire life I'd been ordinary, unremarkable. Now I stood with a book that breathed like a living thing, and a dagger that seemed to drink in the shadows. Guardians of a gate between worlds. Watchers sworn by blood. My family, my bloodline had carried this secret for centuries. And now it was mine. I clutched the book tighter, the weight of it sinking into me, pressing against my chest like an anchor. I can't do this, I whispered. Yes, you can. My companion's voice was firm. You've already been chosen. You wouldn't have been called back here if you weren't meant to continue the line. The words should have comforted me, but instead they burned. Chosen? I hadn't asked for this. I wanted my quiet life back. The small routines that once felt suffocating but now seemed like a blessing compared to this burden. The whispers rose again, louder now, until one voice broke free, clear and unmistakable. Daughter of our line, take up the blade. My hand hovered over the dagger. The metal seemed to hum at my touch, as though recognizing me. With a deep breath, I lifted it from the chest. The weight was perfect, almost natural, as if my hand had always been meant to hold it. The moment I did, the shadows in the room shifted. At the far wall, where the symbols glowed faintly, the cloaked figure appeared. He didn't enter through a door or stairway. He simply was. One heartbeat, the wall was bare stone. The next, he was standing there, his hollow eyes fixed on me. You opened it, he said, his voice like smoke curling through my veins. Then the inheritance is mine. No. The words slipped from my lips before I had time to think. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, stronger than I felt. The dagger pulsed, and for the first time, the whispers quieted not in fear, but in approval. I realized then what they had been waiting for. Not gold, not jewels, not secrets. They had been waiting for me to decide. I raised the dagger, the book still pressed against my chest, and met the hollow eyes of the intruder. This inheritance is mine, I said, my voice shaking but unbroken, and I will protect it. For a moment, silence. Then, slowly, the figure's form dissolved, like smoke unraveling in the wind, leaving only the echo of his laughter behind. The room stilled. The house sighed, as though relieved. And I knew this was only the beginning. I hadn't chosen the inheritance, but I had accepted it, and with that acceptance came a truth. I could no longer escape. My life was no longer my own. I was the watcher now,